everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 99 Potions. As one member of Fanbyte likes to call it, the premier RPG Fanbyte podcast, I am one of your hosts, Senior Managing Editor of Fanbyte.com, Stephen Strum. I am joined, as I am every single week, with no interruptions and no differences whatsoever, by Podcast Managing Editor Merritt K.
Still going with that, huh?
Is it still your title? I don't know what your title is anymore.
Look, labels are, I'm not really into that kind of thing. You just, job titles, labels, it's all fluid, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crucially, it's not. It's definitely not. But,
mysterious figure, Merritt K, capital M, capital
mysterious
F.
Stranger.
Mysterious stranger.
Yeah, sometimes I appear in Bats mode and take someone out for you.
Yeah, exactly. Every time I'm fighting a giant scorpion, I know you've got my back. You know who else often has our back on every single episode of 99 Potions thus far? Just like always, it's Rebb Ford from Digital Extremes.
I am I am always, on this podcast, so I'm happy to be back.
Definitely has our back when we're playing Warframe. Well, most of the time.
Depending on where you are in the story, you may have a dissenting opinion. But nevertheless,
listen,
happy to be here. Very excited.
Yeah,
first time guest. Maybe that's the truth. Someone can Google it. Who's telling the truth?
Yeah, I mean the truth is fluid. Merritt just explained this. Depends on what you pick at the end.
Everything is true. Nothing is no.
Well,
that's the backwards of how it normally is.
That's kind of the backwards of how it normally goes.
Thank you for joining us. It's so cool to get to talk to you.
I am very excited. I've been looking forward to this since I was, told that this was something that could happen, and now it's happening, and I don't know what to do. So it's happening.
Welcome to 99 Potions, where we basically make it up on the fly. Normally, we have Natalie doing the notes for us. Natalie, friend of the website. She hasn't been on an episode of 99 Potions before, but she loves to help us out with notes every once in a while. That's not true. She's, of course, one of the regular co-hosts. The regular co-hosts for the show are not here this week. Everybody has other business that they needed to attend to, and they don't know anything about Warframe. So we asked Merritt to come sit in with us to talk. And I think the general gist of where we're going with this in my head, where I had kind of hit was like, we've been threatening to do a Warframe spoiler cast where we just talk openly.
Threatening to speak openly, because that is a weirdly good way of putting it, because so Stephen, you've been playing Warframe for God knows how long.
Since it launched into open beta before early access was a term.
Right. You have Excalibur, the
Excalibur
one.
big boy, yeah.
Yeah, which no one else does.
Excalibur Prime, yeah.
And I started playing, I want to say, in early 2020. And definitely it was a game that I got deeply into during the pandemic. And you had told me kind of like, at some point, you had been like, oh, do you want to know the big Warframe twist? And I was like, yeah, I'm never going to play this game, so sure. And you told me, and I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And then like 2 years later, or however long, I actually played it, and I knew what was coming, right? And I still just started like bawling. And that was like, I think like the first time a video game had made me cry that I could remember. And what's wild about that, and like okay, folks, if you don't know what I'm talking about yet, this is the point of no return. You should know by now, but like the community has done such a good job of like keeping this huge twist a secret for years at this point. And Rebb, how do you like feel about that? Like now it's finally starting to become like, okay, we basically have to be upfront about there's this other aspect of the game where you are actually a character who's been controlling these Warframes the whole time. But what was that like to like be working on this game and with this community that did such a good job of keeping that major twist secret from new players?
I have been in the industry a long time now. I've worked on this game for a long time, and it's still kind of weird that there's not really anything else like it. And I think there's if we're going to go right into using, mafia terminology, because that's, let's just go right there. It's kind of like like the Warframe Omertà is like, and it's not like in a weird way, even though by making it Mafia, I kind of did make it weird and probably the worst analogy I could ever choose. But, video games teach us things, and I learned my mob language through video games. But it's just a very respected and understandable part of what you want someone else to experience, because I think unlike other art forms, video games are experienced interactively, very blah, 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 dissertation and here on that. And I think everyone wants, like you said, that it was the first time that a video game had made you cry in your memory, recent memory or whatnot. And I think for a lot of people, it has that, a rare experience where you get an emotional surprise from a unexpected package of a video game, because their game is sci-fi, it's weird. Right. You think it's just, space shooter. And then when it's not, it's like you don't want to deprive anyone else of that emotional surprise. And as a result, you have this organic, because it has been an organically kept secret. We've used the operator in marketing at times when we need to market to the people that know the secret, right? Because you kind of have to tell the people that are at the tip of the spear what's coming, and you need to use certain assets, whatever, decisions for that. But regardless, there's still that organic layer of community, emotional, I guess, I don't even know what the word would be, but like pathfinding to the Warframe experience. Yeah. So it's nice. It's lovely. It makes me feel happy. It makes me feel privileged to have such a rare and communal understanding. And that is how it makes me feel, to directly answer your question.
So I guess just for people who maybe don't know and want to know, and like don't want to go looking elsewhere for it. Basically, X number of years, was like 5 or 6 years into the game's existence?
It was December 2015 that we released that, which would have been technically 3 years from our closed beta. So 3 years into the game, let's say.
So up to that point, Warframe is like a space ninja game. And there's narrative and there's characters and stuff, but you are a space ninja. And sometimes you switch to a different kind of space ninja, and it's never really explained how that is the case.
You are not a speaking character.
You're not a speaking character. Yeah, you are a silent protagonist, and you're doing missions. You're just gunning down like hundreds of goons, and then it turns out that you go on this story mission. And you find out, actually, the character I have been playing as the whole time is basically a child soldier who has been asleep on the moon and is controlling these warframes, which you later learn were people, but kind of twisted into this like biological weapon form. And there's a scene where you see yourself for the first time. You encounter the pod where your character is, and you do a character, you create that character. And then you are carrying this fragile child who has basically been dreaming for decades out of this pod, and like with your Warframe, and it's like just unbelievable. And like the closest thing I can think of in games is to like, and it doesn't really come close because it's a narrative game mainly, and it's a single player thing, was like Knights of the Old Republic, when you learn that, you're Revan. Right. But like this, there's so much buildup to it that like it just comes out of left field, and it's crazy. And I mean, I think a lot of the new war stuff too. Stephen, you're more familiar with that than me, so maybe you can speak to that. But just like it seems like there's some kind of similar themes of just like gut punches. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Like it's a live game, and you think we can't change the world state? Like, well.
Yeah, I mean, like this is kind of like the thing is the main story that as it is really starts off with the second dream, which is what Rebb just talked about a minute ago, and then like at least from the outside looking in, and Rebb, you could maybe say if I'm completely reading this wrong, but it feels like this is very much like the conclusion of that arc in the new war. The stuff that begins in the second dream kind of like comes to a close and opens up the door to new, weirder stuff, we'll say.
Definitely new, weirder stuff. Looking at my other monitor, even in fact, yeah, you're right. We certainly consider the new war, the story you started with reaches its natural conclusion, but not in a like the game's over way, but in the characters that got you to this point, their story has reached a conclusion, but those characters aren't done yet. Just the element of their story is one character specifically, most obvious because they're not alive, but anyway. But yeah, Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so we get to the end of this, and like we've seen why these child soldiers exist, the Tenno, which is always going to be funny to me. I brought this up to Steve at one point at TennoCon that I always think about Hayden Tenno from Dark Sector, a game that nobody remembers. I feel like, at least in my audience, at the very least. Because, the characters are called the Tenno. They were designed to fight the Sentients, which are sort of these like rogue terraforming robots that have come back through the sort of a warp gate from another galaxy or another part of another system in the Warframe universe, and turned against their masters, who are also pretty evil. The Tenno turn against them. There's a whole bunch of betrayals within betrayal. Some people are being manipulated. Some people are being mind controlled. Some people are pretending to be other people because they're actually weird sort of shape-shifting mimics. Right, Rebb, I don't know if you would know anything about that, but there's a character in Warframe who you think is kind of your friend for a very long time, but then actually it turns out that she's a completely different person.
Is her name Lotus by any chance?
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this actually, because I think you have kind of like a unique position in the live game ecosystem right now, because even, there are comparable games to Warframe in a lot of ways, right? Like there are MMOs, there's Destiny, there's like all these other games that are doing similar kinds of things mechanically and maybe even sometimes narratively. But I don't know that any of those games have had a single character that has been so strongly attached to like the guiding you through the game kind of experience. To the point where like this character, for a long time was just referred to, and I guess still kind of is, as Space Mom, right? What is it like to like play that character, especially then when you're going through, when the narrative is changing, right? Like, what were the reactions like when Lotus is like suddenly not the player's friend anymore?
I asked before this if this was a video podcast, because this is where you would see me light up the cigarette and take a huge drag and be like,
yeah, was that fun for you to be able to do that? Or,
well, Merritt, I'm glad you asked, because it has been I have never looked too closely. The expression, like if you stare too close in the abyss, it'll stare back into you. And I just don't look too closely, because in modern times, it's 2022 now. There's all of the very important lessons about, because games of service have basically just taken over, right? When we started Warframe, it was 2013, and I voiced the Lotus because we had no budget and I had a microphone. Like, that is what happened.
Yeah.
And now we're coming on, we just wrapped up our 9-year anniversary, and I still am not an actor, but I still have a microphone, and I'm still doing it, even though we have more budget, because reasons, it just stuck. Like, why change if it so it kind of worked. Why change it? People got used to it. It's too late to change it now, that's for sure. So we just kept it. And for me, it just becomes very exciting, but very difficult in equal measure, because like I started my 2022 ramble, because you'll find that if you follow certain bubbles on Twitter, it's very easy to put a lot of meaning into what you work on. And there's often, advice to decouple your self-worth from your game and decouple your sense of self from your video game project, because a lot of game developers are working on live service games, because that is how it's going. And it's very difficult for those developers to not feel what their communities are feeling if they've made a mistake or if they've had a huge win in their game.
Right.
You can see the way game developers interact on Twitter if they've had a good or bad update, right?
Yeah.
So it's very obvious. This is just what happens. So I think there's a very complex layer to my work specifically, because not only am I doing the community work for it with my team, but I'm also a character, which means that I'm either getting sunshine from every angle, or I'm getting blazing hellfire from every angle. Because it's one thing to like read feedback and be like, you read your feedback and you internalize it, but then you're also like, oh, and that woman won't shut the F up, and me, and I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know what to do now.
No, I mean, it's such a unique position, like, to compare again to Destiny, which is a game that I also play a lot of. That game, when Destiny 2 launched, like, they're like, okay, we have this budget to hire voice actors. So like most of those characters are being voiced by like big name voice actors.
Peter Dinklage and Bill Nighy.
Yeah. And, the most interaction that, they'll interact with the community, but no one of those characters is sort of the voice in your head constantly. And someone like Lance Reddick gets to have a lot of fun with that stuff. And no one, I think, is ever going to be mad. I'm sure there are total psychos who are mad at Lance Reddick. But it's a different kind of thing, right? Of like, he gets to record fun memes and stuff. And like, it's like, okay, maybe if Ikora or like another female character in Destiny was like the character who was leading you through everything, it would be similar. But it just seems like, wow, like I have no idea how you manage that. Like, I'm not trying to imply that it's terrible or anything like that, but just like it seems like a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I think at an objective level, the concept of boundaries is very firm when you're a professional voice actor with an IP that you don't control. And in my case, I'm not a professional voice actor. I do have control over the IP, and I'm a public face of the game. So all of those, it's a very objective concept of boundaries and how you manage them, really. Because for people like Lance, he does get to do everything you just said and not have to worry about hotfixing the next build, right? Like no one looks to Lance for patch notes. Like they don't ask Lance where the patch notes. Oh, I'm sure they do actually.
We get comments on our website asking like, when is this bug going to be fixed in Monster Hunter? It's like,
we predicated this joke with like, no one's going to be a psycho to Lance, but maybe we should not have because, but yeah, no one's going to ask him for patch notes because that's not the expectation. And I'm not saying it's even my own personal boundaries if I don't know when to turn on Lotus mode and turn on professional mode. It's the community too. It's equally confusing for them because they're like, I want to ask Rebb for a patch note, but I also am mad because like it's confusing. It's confusing for everyone, and it's not confusing isn't inherently negative. I would say it can be, but it's just interesting. It's just confusing, interesting, boundary, this and that.
Yeah. I mean, like the actual closest like comparison I can think of right now is like Hades, which is a game that is a lot of the people doing the voices and playing the characters in that game, like Zagreus.
Yeah, like Darren Korb. It's Darren. Yeah. I know. Oh, do I again? If we had a camera on, you would see my Hades shrine. But alas, you will not see it.
You're in good company. This website is one of the collectively one of the biggest Hades fans on the planet.
Oh my god, that game.
That game, but that was a game where they put that into the world, and Supergiant traditionally, maybe we'll see some one day, but traditionally they don't do DLC or many post-release updates on their games kind of in general. Whereas Warframe is like a living, evolving product where not only is like the story adding new stuff sometimes, but like old stuff, like old lines and old missions and stuff like that are ripped out of the game and replaced with new stuff. Like that's just the way that live games are made these days. And so like having to kind of like not only make this character work from like expansion to expansion, but also having to like go back and think about like, oh, there's people still re-experiencing old stuff that I would maybe do completely differently back in 20 years ago or whatever it ends up being in the future. Has to be like really weird.
It is. It's all weird. Everything, because I don't know, a lot of companies will plan for their game as service roadmaps and all that stuff, which we kind of do by necessity now, but we really didn't know what was going to happen, and we still don't know what's going to happen. So as a result, every decision has been informed by every decision along our journey has been informed, I would say, by the very singular idea that people like updates in our video game, so let's do more. And it's not that deep. It's not, well, obviously there is a lot of amazing work and talented team developments that go into it, but we're very much still figuring it out, despite the fact that it's been 9 years. So,
yeah. I mean, like, in terms of new content and stuff like that, I don't know that there are many games other than Warframe that like touch on some of the stuff that Warframe does in new updates in terms of story too. Like games like this, Destiny is also a game that I quite enjoy. But like at the end of the day, Destiny is like, there's a big space god, go shoot it with your gun. And, in Warframe, you're ultimately also usually going in and just attacking people and stuff like that. But you always think about like Fortuna and helping to lead a workers' revolution against.
Oh, yes.
God, yes. That fucking chills the first time I heard that song.
Yes.
Just like,
we all lived together.
Yeah, that was just like, wait, what am I even playing? What is happening right now? It's
a very forgiving world to create in, because you can really do whatever you want, and then it would make sense for the context of the game. So it's, I don't know, man. It is by far, every time I see something new in development, it's just such a surprise to me. And it's the, on the spectrum of like risk to reward, we're probably riding both ends extremely aggressively. Like I think of, I play a lot of games, and when I think of the risks and rewards that come with the choices those game mates, a lot of them are tight in the center, like they're low risk but still rewarding. But then we make some decisions sometimes that are high risk, high reward, or it doesn't go as planned all the time. So and we've done every single permutation of that metaphor. So which is inevitable over time, that you're going to have some misses or you're going to have some home runs, and we've done them all. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can't like get those home runs if you don't take those swings, right? And sometimes
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you're gonna, the community, I imagine, like won't react the way you anticipate to something, and that's just something that I feel like is inevitable in live games these days. And like it's, and I think like, I don't know, I feel like communities are still kind of adjusting to that too, of like having like some graciousness towards devs, if that makes sense, of just like, okay, yeah, like, maybe something is a little bit broken, like it's going to be tweaked or it's going to be changed or it's a living thing, right? It's like, it's such a different mode of creating than here is our thing, you can enjoy it, and that's it, right?
Yeah, it is an interaction and not a broadcast often when you're doing the live service update thing. And I think graciousness is a really good word, because it's almost like the metric in which because you really can only ever assess your work by the vocal community. And there's always people that are saying, the vocal minority, vocal majority. I'm sure you see that thrown around all the time, right? So I always find that is a bit of I don't really know how to phrase this, but like there is the vocal majority, and then there's the silent minority. There's just ways of explaining the health of a live service game that always comes down to people only really use the vocal metrics, right? Like no one, when they're participating in the game reaction discourse, is doing it silently. Like even but even by observing the discourse, you're forming an opinion on it. So even if you're not contributing to it, you're coming to a conclusion about how good an update is just by being a passive participant, regardless of if you're part of the vocal group on it. And I'm going somewhere with this. I'm not just ranting, I swear. My point is, and there is a point, is that for me, being on sort of the inside and the outside, because I play a ton of games, I always need to think about the opinions I've formed about other service games and what I based it on. And then I have to apply that to how people are viewing Warframe at any slice in time, because I am like super addicted to Final Fantasy 14 online and I play it all the time. But I don't participate in the community because I just don't. Like I do, but I don't, right? Like I don't I don't have hot takes and I don't broadcast my hot takes, but I read others because it helps me do my job better with my game, I think, when I see and understand what graciousness is allowed in these communities or how the developers are treated. And I can do it outside my Warframe bubble. And I think it informs the way I can interact in my Warframe bubble, because I kind of get what the playing field is like for that game and what the discourse is and why the discourse is the way it is and what decisions triggered what responses with what vocal majorities, minorities, what have you. So being, I don't know. I had a point there. Did that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually going to straight up ask a minute ago, and you already answered like half my question just then, which was basically, I remembered like from a dev stream, you making like some kind of like very offhanded comment, it's just like completely throwaway thing about like Final Fantasy 14. It was like, a game that just did a big thing where it ended a years-long story that it had been building up to for a long time is Final Fantasy 14. And now we're also seeing that in Warframe with the new war kind of ending things with the sort of weapons manufacturer for people who absolutely are just completely uninformed about the story of Warframe. There's like kind of this main villain named Ballas, who's sort of an old arms dealer, scientist, manufacturer kind of guy from a forgotten age who is in this sort of... My read on it very much was it was sort of like a emotionally abusive relationship with your character, the Lotus, and stuff like that. And that's just my personal take on where a lot of that stuff ends up going. You do all that stuff, fight the big bad guy. he blows up, all that stuff. But then that's kind of the end of the new war. And meanwhile, over in Final Fantasy, they're doing like Endwalker, and Endwalker ends the stuff with the Ascians and the stuff, something we've talked about here on 99 Potions a whole lot. And I'm kind of curious, like, you see this happen in media all the time with like everybody doing vampire stuff at the same time, or everybody doing cowboy stuff at the same time, and just 6 movies all come out that tend to do this same trend. And I'm kind of curious if that is the kind of a greater trend that you at Digital Extremes have like observed, and that's kind of why it felt like time to wrap things up and move on to something new, or if this was just like kind of a complete coincidence, or like what kind of inspirations and like influences are kind of like weighing on the Warframe story right now.
That was definitely a coincidence because, like it or not, we started advertising the new war in 2018 and we released it at the end of 2021. So
that's true. Good point.
I mean, like that is a fact. No need to Google that fact. The 2018 TennoCon ended with a new war trailer. I'm fairly confident. And yeah, then it released at the end of 2021. So reasons being reasons, things happened. It took a long time. LOL tried to adapt to remote work in a pandemic, but we did it. It's out, and the timing is purely coincidental. However, having said that, I think a lot of the patterns, we'll say, or correlations among live service game developers is most observable in release cadence, and you'll often see developers not of similar sizes, because I think we're a very small team compared to some other game as service titles. Like, I think we're probably one of the smallest if you look at all the other games as services. Everyone seems to try and to match the release cadence. And I don't know, to be honest, if it's orchestrated by any top level thinking, like, oh, Final Fantasy does updates every 4 months, we should do, or, you know, insert game name there. But it does seem to be, at least in my experience, that you need a update cadence that isn't too long, but isn't too short. Because if it's too short, you can't make meaningful enough updates, or your updates will just be rushed, which we've suffered from. Or if they're too long, people will lose interest in your game, which we've also suffered from. So people are trying to find that sweet spot of quality updates over time. And it seems to be 4-month cycles, to be honest. And that's where everyone's kind of coincidentally gravitated toward, at least in the games I play. So
yeah,
I would.
And I was just going to say, I wonder too, if like, you know, just like the concept of like one era ending and like a new era beginning. Maybe that's just
you're
like
saying like the broader theme, not literally the, you know, objective scheduling, the thematic relevancy. I think that is okay. So let me think. When I started, I honestly, that's just a coincidence too, because I think we share a journey with some other long-term games in terms of when our games launched and where the arcs have gone and the time to make those major updates. But pretty no intentional theming with, you know, I guess if like Avengers Endgame came out that year too, it would be like this massive, you know, maybe it did. I don't even know when did that come out last year? No.
I have no sense of time. I think it was a 2019.
Oh, okay, never mind.
It was definitely pre-pandemic because
I was in a theater.
theaters.
Yeah, okay, never mind. I was like, man, if that came out anyway. Point being, thematic coincidences, but thematically a devastate. Oh, there's the Google April 26, 2019. Thematically devastating year end for me, definitely. If that's really where you wanted to go with that, because the arc was over. I played Endwalker and the New War within like 1 week of each other, and I'm pretty sure I just sat in my room and cried for a week straight because of both of them. So, good times.
That's why we play video games, right? It's to devastate ourselves until we to cry.
Famously.
Yeah, games famous for their crying.
Famously, yeah. One thing like I'm kind of curious about from the perspective of someone, you know, working on a live game, you know, I'll play, you know, Warframe or Destiny and be like, and have these really, you know, intense moments, like, which is something that I think live games can do in a really cool way, because just by virtue of playing something for so long, you build investment with the world and the characters. And so I think there almost is like more potential sometimes for those moments to happen. But like, I can have those because I've been playing these games for like however long, right?
Right.
But, you know, if I tell someone, oh, hey, you should really play the new season of Destiny because, wow, you will not believe what happens to Crow. And like, there's so much trauma stuff and like facing your shadow and all these things. They'll just be like, who are any of those people? And it's like, you can't even, sometimes like this older stuff, gets vaulted or replaced or whatever. So how do you how do you strike that balance of, I know this is, in one sense, primarily like a dev question, but narratively, how do you strike the balance of giving payoffs to longer term players while also having someone new come in and be like, okay, I have a sense of where I fit in this world?
It's distressingly hard to do. And
yeah.
it is probably the cause of the most debate internally, because for the start of this podcast, we were saying, when you get to the second dream, that's an important thing, and it makes you feel, it makes you cry. And, every now and then someone will say, maybe we should make it within the first 5 hours of the game. And we're kind of like, yeah, we probably should, because, competition, and no one wants to go through 20 hours of grinding to get an emotional high. But then you have to ask yourself, is what makes the second dream work the fact that it is so hidden, and it's not in that first 5 hours of your journey. These are just rough numbers. So, and for us, that is a huge problem to continue debating, because we know the strength of our story. I'm not being,
No, I mean, you shouldn't have to be humble about it. It's a good story.
We know the strength of that as a player, as watching people react to it. And that is something that if you're making any critical decisions about how to improve your game, for us, we can't take anything away that works from the story. So we need to remove obstacles from accessing it, figure out ways, all of these things that I'm describing. And for us, it's not really an option to remove any part of it, but we have removed, we've done seasonal events. And, in 2015, there was an event that gave you some lore on a character, Alad V, which is currently somewhat absent from the game because the player who didn't play that event didn't get that interaction with him. Even though that's not a main story critical interaction.
I really need to know where Alad V got his jacket from. That's a really crucial.
It is, and if you only played the jacketing event, you would know, but the jacketing. Yeah, it's I don't know. There's so many problems and solutions available. It's very hard. Everyone's trying to do it. If you I know you keep mentioning Destiny, but I'm going to keep mentioning Final Fantasy.
Do it.
If I want to get one of my friends into the game, I can play the entire campaign with them, or I could, slip them $40 and buy them a story, buy them a story skip. But then it's like, oh my God, you just skipped the shit that I've been simping about and doing cosplay over. You're not going to have any idea who I'm cosplaying or who I'm getting fan art made of. Don't you want to know who these characters are? And of course they do, but they also don't want to spend 120 hours figuring it out. So,
Final Fantasy is a game that has very clearly dealt with that same issue and has approached it in pretty much the exact opposite way, which is them basically saying, let's just cut a bunch of this stuff out. They did that, the crunch of the story mode stuff for the 1.0. It's we know nobody likes the early stuff, so let's just cut out 25% of it.
Yeah.
And we kind of have go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, please.
We have or at least I have a list of now, every time we release something that comes after the new war, we need to shorten the road to get there by equal amount. And it can't be when I say shorten the road, I don't mean cut out this quest. Never, no. I mean, holy shit, in 20, am I allowed to swear? By the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Encouraged even.
Fantastic. So when we look at a decision made in 2015 or 2016 or 2017, it's been 5 years. You need to review those decisions. So one of them recently we cut out was you used to have to build a Spectre before you could progress in the star chart, which is either an 8-hour, that's an 8-hour wait wall or pay to progress. And we're okay, that's kind of an antiquated decision. Let's just get rid of that. So that alone, someone can now on paper reach the story 8 hours faster if they're a totally free player. So we just need to look at everything, every obstacle on the road to the new war, which is what I call it, because we know what the road is. You have to do Second Dream, you have to do War Within, you got to do Sacrifice, you got to do Chains of Harrow, all that stuff. And anything that's an obstacle to that just needs to go away if it doesn't make sense for it to be there. And it's super challenging because we also build all this other cool shit like Railjack and Necromex, and those are mandatory for the new war, which we're trying to make easier for players to get. But they're still, if you were to ask a consulting firm, they would still say those are obstacles to the new war. Like if your goal is get player to new war, those are 2 obstacles. So now we have to figure out what we're going to do about that and make it easier and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of cool content in the game that you could absolutely basically never see if you didn't know to look for it. Like, Eidolon hunting, profit taker fights, that sort of stuff. Like that is like this really big thing. Like I know Merritt and I tried to catch Merritt up to the new war over the weekend, and she like logged into the game, and I just remember hearing her go, "Ah!" and she was like bombarded with like messages from Ortis. Yeah, it was just like, "Oh, by the way, we've made this easier. Railjacks are easier to get now. Necromechs are easier. Here's some blueprints over here. We've refunded all your focus points because that stuff is completely changed now to make it a little bit more streamlined. But here's a bunch of items that you can turn in to get extra focus XP, and like that stuff is super super appreciated, I think, by most people. But yeah, I'm sure that is such a weird line to walk, especially like if a person, I will admit it, and I'm sorry, Rebb, if this makes me a bad person. I tend to play Warframe in fits and starts. I tend to.
I thought you were a bad person before you said that.
Oh, okay.
So just confirmed.
Then I'm good because nothing has changed. I usually play like I'll be like, it's a new update time. I'm going to play 60 hours for the next like 2 weeks, and then I just completely fall off for 2 months, and then I come back and I play like a ton again, and then I fall off. And if you are somebody who falls off for a long time, like a lot of that stuff can change. And this is not just a Warframe exclusive problem. This happens in Path of Exile and all kinds of other stuff. But like all the stuff that I used to know how to do is just gone or completely changed or whatever. Like this character that was my go-tos, if you were one of those people playing Zephyr a lot before her rework, for instance, I don't know how many of those people exist.
All of the big Zephyr fans before the rework because it was such a high tier frame.
Yeah, exactly. You could come back and theoretically be like, I don't even know what this character is anymore.
I mean, only dwarfed by the Grendel.
The Grendel meta.
Yeah.
Yes.
Grendel was the first Warframe that I ever got. I don't know if I've ever told you that, Steven.
That might put you in a very unique
when I started playing, I was like, I'll pick Excalibur because swords are cool. And then I was like, I think Grendel was the newest one. And I was like, oh, this seems cool. It's like, I love Kirby. So sure, yeah, I'm going to be Grendel. And then I was like, I don't know how to play Warframe. And then it turned out that a lot of it was just like, oh no, it's just kind of a weird guy. But that seems, that seems almost harder to me than like the new player experience is like the returning player experience, right?
Right.
Because a new player maybe doesn't necessarily have expectations, but like a returning player, they're bringing all of these things with them, and a lot of times people are afraid of change. And so like, how do you catch people up and say like, okay, no, it's still what you liked, but here's all the things that are better now.
Well, anyone have the answer to that on this podcast?
Hey, Jordan, you want to come into the call real quick?
Yeah, Jordan, could you Google, Jordan, really quickly, Google how to get returning players to understand Warframe? Because if you could, I would be most interested in what Google has to say about that.
Because that seems like a big struggle, right? Because like, if it's, I kind of wonder almost like how much you or like any live game developer looks to like TV series, like long-running TV shows to sort of deal with
all
stuff.
the time. I use anime metaphors. I call it we're One Piece. Like like we're totally One Piece, and it's. I would say, for the times when I'm sort of in like, let's say casual, it's a weekend and I'm just shooting the shit with some friends talking about video games. There are a few things. I would rather like someone I'm sort of friends with for whatever tell me like, oh, I tried Warframe and I couldn't get into it. Didn't really play that much. I would rather hear that than, oh, I love Warframe. I played for like 500 hours, but I just can't get back into it. Like to me, that is so much worse because I'm like, weird, like first of all, I do think you can be done with Warframe. You can have all the fun you're ever going to get out of the game because you played it for like 1,000 hours, you binged it, you got what you wanted from it. That's awesome. But there's something so much more difficult to problem solve about the person that is having trouble getting back into it, that they know they're not done with their Warframe journey, but they just don't know how to get back into it. And that, I think that's probably the biggest problem we have, because the game's been around for so long that you're going to have people that played for hundreds of hours in 2015 or 2017, that there's so much for them to play now. And there's just so much there. And it's like, there's great stuff to play. And there's a great, like, if you haven't come back for the new war, I don't know what's going to get you back in the game, because that is very much a crown jewel-ish. Like, just again, I'm just using quick metaphors here. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's a very good reason to come back to the game. And if you didn't, then it's like, I don't know. Like,
Right.
This is almost like a weird place where our kind of like two roles in the industry sort of overlap in a weird way, because that's like literally at least at Fanbyte, at a website that covers a lot of live games very often. Like when we started the website, they asked like, okay, what are we going to focus on? And one of the things that like John and Dylan and I like hammered on was just like, we got to cover live games, because nobody knows these games well enough. Nobody who's covering video games is covering video games 6 months after that game comes out, because nobody has the time.
Yeah.
So like our guides need to focus on that kind of stuff, because like if you look at things like Steam charts or other things and like see who's playing what, there's like, you know, obviously there are standouts, like Elden Ring is going to explode for 2 months, but then a lot of the times it's like, yeah, number 10 game, it's still Warframe, and it's still been Warframe this whole time. That's just like quietly humming in the background, being incredibly popular. And like, you know, I just dropped in the chat here, like I'm trying to solve this for Warframe by like doing infographics and stuff. It's like, what is it that makes it click for people? And we were coming off of like kind of a weird place when Fanbyte got like founded, where everybody had pivoted to video, and that turned out to be a huge scam. All the Facebook stuff with like them juicing their numbers. And the thing about video is like, people hate video guides a lot of the time. People hate scrubbing through videos to like find specific little bits of information at the 30 seconds in or 40 seconds in, when they could just hit control, you know, or hit F4 and then look for a specific word in a text guide, or have their phone open and continually refer back to stuff like that. So that's something that we've been like trying to solve. It's like, but with Warframe, it's often like the game is so big. It's like, how do we even tell people what they don't know? Like, how do we make it so people can find this information, because they don't even know what they don't know?
Yeah, it's I kind of see the overlap you're describing because of those elements, indeed, because the game has, you know, we've had a consistent, you know, group of players for quite some time, and we're always just kind of the one consistent bit on, you know, the top 30, top 20 Steam charts or what have you. We're just kind of there, you know, sitting around, people still playing, but we're not in the, at least like, it's weird because I don't even know where I'm going with this now. Do you have any questions before I keep rambling?
What's your favorite moment from that? Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, like, continuing on that trend of like media stuff, I'm curious, like, what is your sense of how, you know, people who aren't like dedicated Warframe content creators, like people outside of that ecosystem, what is your sense of the perception of the game today from, you know, like an IGN or from other sites like that? Because like Stephen was talking about, I think there still is a perception that a lot of live games are, well, especially with Warframe is, you know, is kind of an interesting example, right? Because it, I think, has shed a lot of the stigma of free to play, but definitely had that for a long time, for better or worse. And, you know, I think a lot of people looking in from the outside were like not really sure what it was about, and just sort of saw, oh, it's free to play. Oh, it's, you know, exploitative or whatever. Do you think that's changing? Has like the perception of the game, have people started to be like, oh, I see why all of these people like it now?
I haven't had to critically engage with monetization criticism in well, that's not entirely true, but I haven't had, like, in terms of like general gaming perception of our monetization, I haven't had to engage too much in trying to, you know, correct folks or make sure that everyone has the right understanding. I do think the stigma has worn off. Like, we've made like one monetization choice last year, I think, that ruffled a lot of feathers that we rectified within, you know, a month or so. And and everyone kind of understood it wasn't like an on the slick monetization thing. It was literally just like, oh, we could have done it better, so we fixed it. At least that's what I hope. Like some people probably still hold a grudge about it, but the grudge would be misplaced because we didn't do it out of malice. It was nothing of that nature. So most people seem to get that. And I think you mentioned graciousness earlier, and that goes to show that people can be gracious if, we are responsive and fix mistakes and such. So I think like the monetization side from the outside industry perspective looking in my opinion, as ill-informed as it may be, I think we're kind of over any knee-jerk criticisms to our game being monetization driven. I just don't think are a problem. But because I'm on a podcast with people and I've been sitting alone for 2 years, it's nice to talk. I actually don't know what the perception of Warframe is if you're not in the bubble of it, because I think we do have a perception problem, and I don't know why, and I don't know what it is. I'm so close to I'm very lost in the sauce of Warframe. So every time I see like the people, like honestly, like Merritt, I follow you on Twitter, and like I always love your tweets, and I'm always, depending on what game you're on or whatever you're doing, I'm always wondering like, what do you actually think about Warframe, and why, like what is it? And I think there's something that I don't know if it's I'm not saying for you, but I think it's like too weird for some people, or there's like a smell to it that just isn't mainstream for some reason, because a lot of people play Warframe. But not a lot of people talk about it. So I don't know why that is. I don't know what the smell is. I don't know. So if you could
say, before I ever played it, I would see people talking about it. And, this was before I sort of had like a distrust of a lot of life games back then. So this wasn't specific to it. But like I would see people occasionally talking about it and just be like, oh, this is a game for perverts. Okay. Not in like the, necessarily perverts. Sexual sense, but just like, oh, this is like a weird, it's like tons of like stats and like just very weird character designs. Okay. Yeah, sure. I'm putting it where in the part of my brain that also holds Phantasy Star Online. And that's that. And so I think there is probably something to that, is like, it is like, I think that's a consequence of like making kind of bold aesthetic and narrative choices, is that to a lot of people, that's going to be like, oh, this doesn't look like what I expect it to look like, or like, I can't make heads or tails of this. So, I mean, it's not for me.
Like, if you compare Warframe to like other games that have lots of like new characters, and where one of the big appeal is, oh, they've added a new guy to this one. Like it's very, like Genshin, like a very reductive way to refer to it is it's very tough to sell like people on Warframe from like a shipping perspective, or like this, fic and like characters. Like you look at, I don't even know who, like you look at, Baruch, and it's like, okay, this guy doesn't have a face.
Crucially, none of the Warframes, well, I don't know if any of them at this point, but most of them don't have eyes even, right? Like that's a deliberate choice, and it makes the game look really distinctive and unique. And like, I love the way that Warframe looks. But yeah, it's you can't just be like, we added a new anime girl.
And it's like everybody on Twitter is saying like mommy, that's the closest thing you maybe get is like Hildren and stuff like that. They're like Warframe, I think, can definitely express itself with like characters and personality and like movement and, emotes and, body types and all that kind of stuff. But it is kind of a harder sell to, I think, a mainstream audience.
Too Cronenbergian, maybe.
But
that's why I love it. It's great. Like that's, to me, it doesn't look like anything else. There are a million games with anime characters. There are a million games with army guys. How many games are there with, really wet space alchemists,
bug people,
who are also bugs, or like two guys slammed into one guy, or a Kirby, but his stomach is a big mouth. Like,
very important question.
There's one. It's Warframe.
Yeah, there's one, and I treasure that. I do, but it is, and the instigating mental part of this I have is like, I don't know what it is. Like, it's mainstream, but it's really not, and people compare us to games that are way above our weight class, frankly, right? And that is always very challenging, because yeah, we got bought by Tencent and stuff, but like nothing has changed for me and the team in that regard. And like even though now we're part of like the biggest, I guess one of the biggest, I don't really know, but like I still don't like, I don't feel like I'm part of it because we're so independent still, but we're not independent. I know, because we're owned by Tencent or whatever, but like for my day to day, nothing has really changed, but we now are in a bigger picture. Right. Like, you know, like the Path of Exile team are also owned by...
right. Jesus.
Right. Like,
disclaimer, we are also owned by Tencent.
We are also owned by Tencent.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a lot of that going around.
We literally just keep forgetting. Like I didn't realize that Warframe had been bought, or that Digital Extremes had been bought by Tencent, or
I thought they had been bought by. I thought you had been bought by that chicken company.
We were, and then they
got bought.
Yeah, they got bought.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So disclaimer. We always forget who is owned by Tencent at this point, because like everybody is either owned by Tencent or Embracer.
We don't, like, no one keeps us up to date on these things. We don't have special access to things.
This is wild then. So like, that's what I mean. Like we didn't both know that, and we're talking about it. And this is when we discovered that. Like, so like, that's how little impact it's had. Not like, I'm not saying this in any other thing other than facts. So yeah, that's nuts. Oh my God.
It's funny.
Tencent's management style is often just like, okay, we bought you, now just like make sure the numbers go up above this line for the next like 6 months, and then like they never talk to you again.
I don't know, man. Like that's so wild, but oh, okay, that's crazy.
But it is funny that people, you know, that Warframe has like made it into the same weight class, like you put it, as a lot of other live games, because to me, like I still think of Digital Extremes as like a scrappy, maybe it's just the Canadian thing, and I'm Canadian, so I'm allowed to say this. But just like being Canadian, it's like, wow, you're competing with like, you know, these, you know, the big teams in the US with Bungie and with Square and in Japan and all this stuff. And it's cool, right? Like it's cool. Like obviously, you know, the team has grown and like it's gotten bigger, but you just love to see a little guy win, you know?
I mean, that's just it, right? Like I guess we're not really punching above our weight class anymore, like I said, because we have a parent company, but whatever. Like we've rambled.
But that's fairly
enough.
Recent, yeah. I mean, like that, and I think the associations with those other games date back before that too. So
they totally do, and I think that was, you know, if we want to get into the mind share of the gamer's ability to compare and contrast, and what that's like for teams that. At the end of the day, everyone wants to see everyone else succeed. Like I am obsessed with playing games in the industry, which means every game developer in my heart, or like in my heart and soul, are my friends, even if they don't know me. I'm like, I love you guys, you're my friends, because we all go through it being whatever.
I know Darren Korb is my personal friend because I formed a deep emotional attachment with him personally by playing Hades, and I know a lot about him. And
parasocial who? I don't know. He's my bestie. Like this is how I go. But so when people compare the compare and contrast ability on websites that don't allow for nuance is very toxic. It's just like it's
zero
all the way down.
It doesn't need to be, right?
Exactly. And you see this with like anytime like someone tweets about like Xbox versus PlayStation, like it's the same language. It's all the same shit. Like it's
right.
Comparison and contrasting is the only way to validate what you like better, and putting something else down to put your favorite thing up. It's just, I don't engage with it. I don't do it. But people do it. And
it's the way to be.
Yeah. So for me,
just get off Twitter. Don't read it as much as you can.
Yes, that is the diagnosis, and that is the cure. However, I hate myself, so I go on Twitter all the time. So I'm always on Twitter. But no, I think my point is we like to try to make the video game, and people compare it to many things, but we all know the truth, which is everyone wants everyone else to succeed and learn from each other's successes, which is why I have Bungie's GDC talks open on my other monitor. So like we willingly share info, and GDC is awesome because game devs get together and are like, yo, here's what worked for us. Here's what didn't. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what that means in our context. So that is the better for everyone. A rising tide raises all boats, especially when it's climate change driven and no one can be not on a boat. So.
Just getting real dark for a second there.
Yeah, let's go there. I don't know what.
You know, Listen, we were talking about the ending of one era, the beginning of a next.
Yeah,
let's go.
The time of man is over.
It's time. It's Oryx time to shine now, baby.
Yes.
Meat's back on the menu. I think probably this podcast is going off the menu though right now, right?
So. Well, I mean, everybody's had their meal and they can move on to another thing for next week. You got to let them give them about 7 days to digest for the next episode of 99 Potions.
Like just a really short-term Sarlacc.
Yeah.
It will be slowly digested over a period of 7 days.
Well, that's not too bad. I think I could handle that.
All right.
Thank you, Rebb, so much for being on.
Anytime.
It's so great to talk to you. Oh my God.
Yes, this is the best. I'm literally smiling as I speak this whole time. So very happy. Thank you.
And thank you, Merritt, for guesting on this episode as well. It's been too long.
Yeah. Glad to be back.
And thank you to our producer, Jordan. You can follow Jordan on Twitter at Jordan_Mallory. Where can people find you, Merritt?
I'm on Twitter at Mary Kay.
And Rebb, do you want to share? Do you have anything you want to share? Anything you want to plug other than obviously the video game that you are in and work on?
Well, if my wonderful 1 hour pitch on Warframe didn't inspire you to play it and all the places we went with it, you should play Warframe. We have a TennoCon coming up. It'll be great. I'm working on it right after this podcast. Don't miss it.
That's a good shout because if people don't know, TennoCon, the actual Warframe convention that used to be in person, maybe will be one day again, but has not been for obvious reasons, with things being the way that they are in the world. Usually really, really, really big announcements at TennoCon. And actually, it's probably one of the places where I usually see the most. If you look on Twitter when people are posting from TennoCon, and I remember when I was posting from TennoCon, on the show floor watching Tenno Live and stuff like that, and people would always just respond to my tweets what is this video game?
Mm-hmm.
What is going on over there? What have you people done? So yeah, if people want to check out Warframe and see what's going on next, that's on July. When is
July 16th? Please take a look. It's going to be really weird and awesome.
Ooh, I'm excited. The weird shit. The one thing we didn't really spoil much after New War is the very last shot of the thing that happens in that thing, which is very out there. So people should go catch up on the game and see for themselves. You can also follow me on Twitter at Steven Strom, StevenStrom. You can follow Fanbyte Media on Twitter at Fanbyte Media. And just generally, go tell your friends. Go let everybody know that they should go listen to 99 Potions. And that's still one of the best ways that we have to grow the show. And that's one of the best ways you can currently support us. Go read the website. It's also a great way to support us. We have a lot of writing about Warframe, in fact, and a bunch of the other video games that we talked about on this week's episode. That should just about do it for us. But as Rebb and Merritt, you both know that we have a tradition on this podcast that we do.
I thought you stopped doing this because people complained.
Oh, we changed it.
Oh.
We have a different tradition.
Oh, why is it now?
We like to sidle on up over to the bar. I don't know why it's a bar because they are potions, and you would think that would be some kind of alchemist or potion seller, but John decided it was a bar. We sidle up to the bar, we grab a big potion, and we give it a nice clink.